That's excellent. Okay, well, we're on live stream now.
Tonight.
Let me just tell the live stream crowd that we are continuing with the reading of Oxen and the Sun, which continues to entail all kinds of interesting use of language. I'll leave it at that. And we have our reading list. Does everybody see the reading list?
Yeah.
Okay. And I assume you know where we are. Oh, you know what I need? I need to put my microphone on. Sorry about that.
We can hear you.
Well, hopefully you can hear me even better now. Okay. To revert to Mr. Bloom, who after his first entry had been conscious of some impudent mocks, which he, however, had borne with being the fruits of that age upon which it is commonly charged that it knows not pity. The young sparks, it is true, were as full of extravagancies as overgrown children. The words of their tumultuary discussions were difficulty understood, and often not often nice. Their testiness and outrageous motts were such that his intellects recoiled from, I guess that's recoiled from, actually. Nor were they scrupulously
Resiled, Duncan. Sorry, it's resiled. It's a sort of a legal term.
Ah, thank you. New to me. Nor were they scrupulously sensible of the proprieties through their fund of strong animal spirits spoken in their behalf. But the word of Mr. Costello was an unwelcome language for him, for he nauseated the wretch that seemed to him a crop-eared creature of a misshapen gibbosity born out of wedlock and thrust like a crook-backed teeth and feet first into the world, which the dent of the surgeon's pliers and his skull lent indeed a color to, so as it put him in thought of the missing link of creation's chain, desiderated by the late ingenious Mr. Darwin. It was now for more than the middle span of our allotted years that he had passed through the thousand vicissitudes of existence. And being of a wary ascendancy, and self a man of rare forecast, he had enjoined his heart to repress all motions of a rising choler, and by intercepting them with the readiest precaution, foster within his breast that plenitude of sufferance, which base minds jeer at, rash judges scorn, and all find tolerable and but tolerable. Next, please.
To those who create themselves wits at the cost of feminine delicacy, a habit of mind which he never did hold with, to them he would concede neither to bear the name nor to inherit the tradition of a proper breeding, while for such that, having lost all forbearance, can lose no more, there remained the sharp antidote of experience to cause their insolency to beat a precipitate and inglorious retreat. Not but what he could feel with meddlesome use, which, caring not for the mows of dotards or the gruntlings of the severe, is ever, as the chaste fancy of the holy writer expresses it, for the eating of the tree forbid, yet not so far forth as to pretermit humanity upon any condition soever towards a gentlewoman when she was about her lawful occasions. To conclude, While from the sister's words, he had reckoned upon a speedy delivery, he was, however, it must be owned, not a little alleviated by the intelligence that the issue so auspiciated, after an ordeal of such duress, now testified once more to the mercy as well as to the bounty of the Supreme Being. Accordingly, he broke his mind to his neighbour, saying that to express his notion of the thing, his opinion, who ought not perchance to express one, was that one must have a cold constitution and a frigid genius not to be rejoiced by this freshest news of the fruition of her confinement, since she had been in such pain through no fault of hers. This dressy young blade said it was her husband's that put her in that expectation, or at least it ought to be, unless some other Ephesian matron. I must
acquaint you, said Mr. Cruthers, clapping on the table so as to invoke a resonant comment of emphasis. Old Glory Alleluia was round again today. An elderly man with Dundrearies, preferring through his nose a request to have word of Wilhelmina, my life, as he calls her. I bade him hold himself in readiness for that the event would burst anon. Schleif, I'll be round with you. I cannot but extol the virile courtesy of the old bucko that could still knock another child out of her. Old frail to praising of it, even after his own fashion, though the same young blade held with his former view that another than her congenial had been the man in the gap, a clerk in orders, a link boy virtuous, or an itinerant vendor of articles, needed in every household. Singler communed the guest with himself, the wonderfully unequal faculty of metempsychosis processed by them, that the puerile dormitory and the dissecting theatre should be the seminaries of such frivolity, that the mere acquisition of academic titles should suffice to transform, in a pitch of time, these votaries of levity into exemplary practitioners of an art which most men, anywise eminent, have esteemed the noblest. But he further added, it is mayhap to relieve the pent-up feelings that is common oppress them, for I have more than once observed the birds of a feather laugh together. Next, please.
But with what fitness, let it be asked, of the noble lord, his patron, has this alien, whom the concession of a gracious prince has admitted to civil rights, constituted himself the lord paramount of our internal polity? Where is now that gratitude which loyalty should have counselled? During the recent war, whenever the enemy had a temporary advantage with his granados, did this traitor to his kind not seize the moment to discharge his peace against the empire of which he is a tenant at will, while he trembled for the security of his 4%? Has he forgotten this, as he forgets all benefits received? Or is it that, from being a deluder of others, he has become at last his own dupe, as he is, if report belie him not, his own and his only enjoyer? Far be it from candour to violate the bedchamber of a respectable lady, the daughter of a gallant major, or to cast the most distant reflections upon her virtue. But if he challenges attention there, as it was indeed highly his interest not to have done, then be it so. Unhappy woman, she has been too long and too persistently denied her legitimate prerogative to listen to his objurgations with any other feeling than the derision of the desperate. He says this, a censor of morals, a very pelican in his piety, who did not scruple, oblivious to the ties of nature, to attempt illicit intercourse with a female domestic drawn from the lowest strata of society. Nay, had the huzzy's scouring brush not been her tutelary angel, it had gone with her as hard as with Hagar the Egyptian. In the question of the grazing lands, his peevish asperity is notorious. And Mr. Cupp's hearing brought upon him from an indignant rancher a scathing retort, couched in terms as straightforward as they were bucolic. It ill becomes him to preach that gospel. As he knocked nearer home, a seed field that lies fallow for the want of a ploughshare, a habit reprehensible at puberty, is second nature and an opprobrium in middle life. If he must dispense his balm of Gilead in nostrums and apple gems of dubious taste to restore to health a generation of unfledged profligates, let his practice consist better with the doctrines that now engross him. His marital breast is the repository of secrets, which decorum is reluctant to adduce. The lewd suggestions of some faded beauty may console him for a consort neglected and debauched, but this new exponent of morals and healer of ills is at his best an exotic tree, which, when rooted in its native orient, throve and flourished and was abundant in balm, but transplanted to a clime more temperate, its roots have lost their quondam vigor, while the stuff that comes away from it is stagnant, acid, and inoperative. Sorry, Jane.
The news was imparted with a circumspection, recalling the ceremonial usages of the sublime port by the second female infirmarian to the junior medical officer in residence, who in his turn announced to the delegation that an heir had been born. When he had betaken himself to the women's apartment to assist at the prescribed ceremony of the afterbirth in the presence of the Secretary of State for Domestic Affairs and members of the Privy Council, silent in unanimous exhaustion and approbation, the delegates chafing under the lengthened solemnity of their vigil and hoping that the joyful occurrence would palliate a license which the simultaneous absence of Abigail and officer rendered the easier, broke out at once into a strife of tongues. In vain, the voice of Mr. Canvasser Bloom was heard, endeavoring to urge, to mollify, to restrain. The moment was too propitious for the display of that discursiveness which seemed the only bond of union among tempers so divergent. Every phase of the situation was successfully eviscerated. The prenatal repugnance of uterine brothers, the cesarean section, posthumity with respect to the father, and that rare form with respect to the mother, the fratricidal case known as the child's murder, and rendered memorable by the impassioned plea of Mr. Advocate Bush, which secured the acquittal of the wrongfully accused, the rights of primogeniture and king's bounty touching twins and triplets, miscarriages, and infanticides, simulated and dissimulated, a cardiac fetus in fetu aprosopia due to a congestion, the agnosia of certain chinless Chinamen cited by Mr. Candidate Mulligan, in consequence of the defective reunion of the maxillary knobs along the medial line, so that, as he said, one ear could hear what the other spoke, the benefits of anesthesia or twilight sleep, the prolongation of labor pains in advanced gravidancy by reason of pressure on the vein, the premature relentment of the amniotic fluid, as exemplified in the actual case, with consequent peril of sepsis to the matrix, artificial insemination by means of syringes, involution of the womb, consequent upon the menopause, the problem of the perpetuation of the species in the case of females impregnated by delinquent rape, That distressing manner of delivery, called by the Brandenburgers Sturzgeburt, the recorded instances of multigeminal, tri-kindled, and monstrous births conceived during the catamenic period, or of consanguineous parents. In a word, all the cases of human nativity, which Aristotle has classified in his masterpiece with chromolithographic illustration. The gravest problems of obstetrics and forensic medicine were examined with as much animation as the most popular beliefs on the state of pregnancy, such as the forbidding to a gravid woman to step over a country stile, lest by her movement the navel cord should strangle her creature, and the injunction upon her in the event of a yearning, ardently and ineffectually entertained, to place her hand against that part of her person which long usage has consecrated as the seat of castigation. Next, please.
The abnormalities of hair lip, breast mole, supernumerary digits, Negro's inkle, strawberry mark, and port wine stain were alleged by one as a prima facie and natural hypothetical explanation of swine-headed. The case of Madame Griselle Stevens was not forgotten, or dog-haired infants occasionally born. The hypothesis of a plasmic memory, advanced by the Caledonian envoy and worthy of the metaphysical traditions of the land he stood for, envisaged in such cases an arrest of embryonic development at some stage antecedent to the human. An outlandish delegate sustained against both these views with such heat as almost carried conviction the theory of copulation between women and the males of brutes. His authority being his own avouchment in support of fables, such as that of the Minotaur, which the genius of the elegant Latin poet has handed down to us in the pages of his Metamorphoses. The impression made by his words was immediate but short-lived. It was effaced as easily as it had been evoked by an allocution from Mr. Candidate Mulligan in that vein of pleasantry which none better than he knew how to effect, postulating as the supremest object of desire a nice, clean old man. Contemporaneously, a heated argument having arisen between Mr. Delegate Madden and Mr. Candidate Lynch regarding the juridical and theological dilemma in the event of one Siamese twin predeceasing the other. The difficulty by mutual consent was referred to Mr. Canvasser Bloom for instant submittal to Mr. Coadjutor Deacon Daedalus. Hitherto silent, whether the better to show by preternatural gravity that curious dignity of the garb with which he was invested, or in obedience to an inward voice, he delivered briefly, and as some thought perfunctorily, the ecclesiastical ordinance forbidding man to put asunder what God has joined. Next, please.
But Malachias' tale began to freeze them with horror. He conjured up the scene before them. The secret panel beside the chimney slid back, and in the recess appeared Haynes. Which of us did not feel his flesh creep? He had a portfolio full of Celtic literature in one hand, in the other a file marked poison. Surprise, horror, loathing were depicted on all faces, while he eyed them with a ghastly grin. I anticipated some such reception, he began with an eldritch laugh, for which it seems history is to blame. Yes, it is true, I am the murderer of Samuel Childs, and how I am punished. The inferno has no terrors for me. This is the appearance is on me. Tear and ages. What way would I be resting at all, he muttered thickly, and I tramping Dublin this while back, with my share of songs, and himself after me, the like of a South or a Bulworth's. My hell and Ireland's is in this life. It is what I tried to obliterate my crime. Distractions, rook shooting, the Erse language, he recited some, laudanum, he raised the file to his lips, camping out, in vain, his spectre stalks me. Dope is my only hope. Ah, destruction. The Black Panther. With a cry, he suddenly vanished and the panels slid back. An instant later, his head appeared in the door opposite and said, "Meet me at Western Row Station at 11:10. He was gone. Tears gushed from the eyes of the dissipated host. The seer raised his hand to heaven, murmuring, "The vendetta of Mananan." The sage repeated, "Lex talionis." The sentimentalist is he who would enjoy without incurring the immense debtorship for a thing done. Malachias, overcome by emotion, ceased. The mystery was unveiled. Haynes was the third brother. His real name was Childs. The Black Panther was himself the ghost of his own father. He drank drugs to obliterate. For this relief, much thanks. The lonely house by the graveyard is uninhabited. No soul will live there. The spider pitches her web in the solitude. The nocturnal rat peers from his hole. A curse is on it. It is haunted. Murderer's ground. Next, please.
Rena?
What is the age of the soul of man? As she hath the virtue of the chameleon to change her hue at every new approach, to be gay with the merry and mournful with the downcast, so too is her age changeable as her mood. No longer is Leopold, as he sits there ruminating, chewing the cud of reminiscence, that state agent of publicity and holder of a modest substance in the funds. A score of years are blown away. He is young Leopold. There, as in a retrospective arrangement, a mirror within a mirror, hey, presto, he beholdeth himself. That young figure of then is seen precociously manly, walking on a nipping morning from the old house in Calambrasil Street to the high school, his book satchel on his bandolier wise, and in it a goodly hunk of wheaten loaf, a mother's thought. Or is it the same figure a year or so gone over in his first hard hat? Ah, that was the day. Already on the road, a full-fledged traveler for the family firm, equipped with an order book, a scented handkerchief, not for show only, his case of bright trinket ware, alas, a thing now of the past, and a quiver full of compliant smiles for this or that, one housewife reckoning it out upon her fingertips, or for the budding virgin shyly acknowledging, but the heart tell me, his studied basements. The scent, the smile, but more than these, the dark eyes and oleaginous address brought home at duskfall many a commission to the head of the firm, seated with Jacob's pipe after like labors in paternal Ing. A meal of noodles, you may be sure, is a Heaton. Reading through round-horned spectacles some paper from the Europe of a month before. Hey, presto, the mirror is breathed on, and the young knight-errant recedes, shrivels, dwindles to a tiny speck within the mist. Now he is himself paternal, and these about him might be his sons. Who can say? The wise father knows his own child. He thinks of a drizzling night in Hatch Street, hard by the bonded stores there, the first. Together she is a poor waif, a child of shame, yours and mine, and all for a bare shilling and her luck penny. Together they hear the heavy tread of the watch as the two rain-capped shadows pass the New Royal University. Next, please.
Bridie Kelly. You will never forget the name. Ever remember the night, first night, the bride night. They are entwined in nethermost darkness, the willer with the willed. In an instant, fiat, light shall flood the world. Did heart leap to heart? Nay, fair reader, in a breath 'twas done, but hold, back, it must not be. In terror the poor girl flees away through the murk. She is the bride of darkness, a daughter of night. She dare not bear the sunny golden babe of day. No, Leopold, name and memory solace thee not. That youthful illusion That youthful illusion of thy strength was taken from thee, and in vain. No son of thy loins is by thee. There is none now to be for Leopold what Leopold was for Rudolph. The voices blend and fuse in clouded silence, silence that is the infinite of space. And swiftly, silently, the soul is wafted over regions of cycles of generations that have lived. A region where gray twilight ever descends, never falls on wide sage green pasture fields, shedding her dusk, scattering a perennial dew of stars. She follows her mother with ungainly steps, a mare leading her filly fold. Twilight phantoms are they, yet molded in prophetic grace of structure, slim, shapely haunches, a supple, tendinous neck, a meek, apprehensive skull. They fade, and phantoms, all are gone. Agendath is a wasteland, a home of screech owls and the sand-blind upapa. Netam, the golden, is no more. And on the highway of the clouds they come, muttering thunders of rebellion, the ghost of beast. Hoo! Hark! Hoo! Parallax stalks behind and goads them, the lancinating lightnings of whose brow are scorpions. Elk and yak, the bull of Bashan and of Babylon, mammoth and mastodon, they come trooping to the sunken sea, lacus mortis. Ominous, revengeful, zodiacal host. They moan, pressing upon the clouds, horned and capricorned, the trumpeted with the tusk, the lion maned and the giant antlered, snouter and crawler, rodent, ruminant, pachyderm, all their moving, moaning multitude murderers of the sun. Next, please.
Onward to the Dead Sea they tramp to drink, unslaked, and with horrible gulpings, the salt, somnolent, inexhaustible flood. And the equine portent grows again, magnified in the deserted heavens, nay, to heaven's own magnitude, till it looms vast over the house of Virgo. And lo, wonder of metapsychosis, it is she, the everlasting bride, harbinger of the day star, the bride ever virgin. It is she, Martha, thou lost one, Millicent the young, the dear, the radiant. How serene does she now arise, the queen among the Pleiades, in the penultimate Andalusian hour, shod in sandals of bright gold, coiffed with veil of, what do you call it? Gossamer. It flows about her starfish flesh, and loose it streams, emerald, sapphire, mauve, and heliotrope, sustained on currents of cold interstellar wind, winding, coiling, simply swirling, writhing in the skies, a mysterious writing, till after a myriad metamorphoses of symbol, it blazes alpha, a ruby, and a triangled sign upon the forehead of Taurus. Francis was reminding Stephen of years before when they had been together at school in Conway's time. He asked about glucon, alicibites, Pisistratus. Where were they now? Neither knew. You've spoken of the past and its phantoms, Stephen said. Why think of them? If I call him into life across the waters of Lethe, will not the poor ghosts trip to my call? Who supposes it? Next.
I, Boas Stephanos Minos, bullock befriending bard, am lord and giver of their life. He encircled his gadding hair with a coronal of vine leaves, smiling at Vincent. That answer and those leaves, Vincent said to him, will adorn you more fitly when something more and greatly more than a capful of light oats can call your genius father. All who wish you well hope this for you. All desire to see you bring forth the work you mediate. I heartily wish you may not fail them. Oh no, Vincent, Lenehan said, laying a hand on the shoulder near him. Have no fear. He could not leave his mother an orphan. The young man's face grew dark. All could see how hard it was for him to be reminded of his promise and of his recent loss. He would have withdrawn from the feast had not the noise of voices allayed the smart. Madden had lost 5 drachmas and sceptre for a whim on the rider's name. Lenin as much more. He told him of the race. The flag fell and off. Scamper. The mare ran out freshly with Madden up. She was leading the field. All hearts were beating. Even Phyllis could not contain herself. She waved her scarf and cried, "Perez!" Sceptre wins. But in the straight and the run home, when all were in close order, the dark horse, throwaway, drew level, reached, outstripped her. All was lost now. Phyllis was silent. Her eyes were sad and Nemo's. "Juno," she cried, "I am undone." But her lover consoled her and brought her a bright casket of gold in which lay some oval sugar plums, which she partook. A tear fell, only one. "A whacking fine whip," said Lenehan, "is W Lane. 4 winners yesterday and 3 today. What a rider is like him. Mount him on the camel or the boisterous buffalo, the victory is in a hack canter is still his. But let us hear it as was the ancient wont. Mercy on the luckless. Poor Sceptre," he said with a light sigh. "She's not the filly that she was. Never by this hand shall behold such another." Next, please.
By gad, sir, a queen of them. Do you remember her, Vincent? I wish you could have seen my queen today. Vincent said how young she was and radiant. Balaj was scarce fair beside her, in her yellow shoes and frock of muslin. I do not know the right name of it. The chestnuts that shaded us were in bloom. The air drooped with their persuasive odor and with pollen floating by us. In the sunny patches, one might easily have cooked on a stone a batch of those buns with currant fruit in them that Peripolemenus sells in his booth near the bridge. But she had not for her teeth but the arm with which I held her, and in that she nibbled mischievously when I pressed too close. A week ago she lay ill, 4 days on the couch, but today she was free, blithe, mocked at peril. She is more taking than her posies too. Mad romp that it is. She had pulled her fill as we reclined together. And in your ear, my friend, you will not think who met us as we left the field. Omni himself. He was walking by the hedge reading. I think a revered book with, I doubt not, a witty letter in it from Glycera or Chloe to keep the page. The sweet creature turned all colours in her confusion, feigning to reprove a slight disorder in her dress. A slip of underwood clung there, for the very trees adored her. When Conmee had passed, she glanced at her lovely echo in the little mirror she carries. But he had been kind. In going by, he had blessed us. The gods, too, are ever kind, Lenehan said. If I had poor luck with Bass's mare, Perhaps this draught of his may serve me more propensely. He was laying his hand upon a wine jar. Malachi saw it and withheld his act, pointing to the stranger and to the scarlet label. Warily, Malachi whispered, "Preserve a druid's silence. His soul is far away. It is as painful perhaps to be awakened from a vision as to be born. Any object, intensely regarded, may be a gate of access to the incorruptible aeon of the gods. Do you think it, Stephen? Theosophus told me so." Stephen answered, "Whom in a previous existence Egyptian priests initiated into the mysteries of karmic law. The lords of the moon, Theosophus told me, an orange fiery shipload from planet Alpha of the lunar chain would not assume the etheric doubles, and these were therefore incarnated by the ruby-colored egos from the second constellation." Jane.
However, as a matter of fact, though, the preposterous surmise about him being in some description of a doldrums or other, or mesmerized, which was entirely due to a misconception of the shallowest character, was not the case at all. The individual whose visual organs, while the above was going on, were at this juncture commencing to exhibit symptoms of animation was an astute, if not astuter than any man living, and anybody that conjectured the contrary would have found themselves pretty speedily in the wrong shot. During the past 4 minutes or thereabouts, he had been staring hard at a certain amount of number 1 Bass bottled by Messrs. Bass and Company at Burton-on-Trent, which happened to be situated amongst a lot of others right opposite to where he was, in which was certainly calculated to attract anyone's remark on account of its scarlet appearance. He was simply and solely, as it subsequently transpired, for reasons best known to himself, which put quite an altogether different complexion on the proceedings. After the moment before his observations about boyhood days in the turf, recollecting 2 or 3 private transactions of his own, which the other 2 were as mutually innocent of as the babe unborn. Eventually, however, both their eyes met, and as soon as it began to dawn on him that the other was endeavoring to help himself to the thing, he involuntarily determined to help him himself. And so he accordingly took hold of the medium-sized glass recipient, which contained the fluid sought after, and made a capacious hole in it by pouring a lot of it out with, also at the same time, however, a considerable degree of attentiveness in order not to upset any of the beer that was in it about the place. Next, please.
The debate which ensued was in its scope and progress an epitome of the course of life. Neither place nor counsel was lacking in dignity. The debaters were the keenest in the land, assembly so representative and so varied, nor had the old rafters of that establishment ever listened to a language so encyclopedic. A gallant scene in truth it made. Crotters was there at the foot of the table in his striking Highland garb, his face glowing from the briny airs of the Mull of Galloway. There too, opposite to him, was Lynch, whose countenance bore already the stigmata of early depravity and premature wisdom. Next, the Scotchman was the place assigned to Costello, the eccentric, while at his side was seated in stolid repose the squat form of Madden. The chair of the resident indeed stood vacant before the hearth, but on either flank of it the figure of Bannon in explorer's kit of tweed shorts and salted cowhide brogues contrasted sharply with the primrose elegance and town-bred manners of Malachi Roland St. John Mulligan. Lastly, at the head of the board was the young poet who found a refuge from his labours of pedagogy and metaphysical inquisition in the convivial atmosphere of Socratic discussion, while to right and left of him were accommodated the flippant prognosticator, fresh from the hippodrome, and that vigilant wanderer, soiled by the dust of travel and combat, and stained by the mire of indelible dishonor, but from whose steadfast and constant heart no lure or peril or threat or degradation could ever efface the image of that voluptuous loveliness which the inspired pencil of Lafayette has limned for ages yet to come. Next.
It had better be stated here and now at the outset that the perverted transcendentalism to which Mr. S. Daedalus's Div Scep contentions would appear to prove him pretty badly addicted runs directly counter to accepted scientific methods. Science, it cannot be too often repeated, deals with tangible phenomena. The man of science, like the man in the street, has to face hard-headed facts that cannot be blinked and explain them as best he can. There may be, it is true, some questions which science cannot answer at present, such as the first problem submitted by Mr. L. Bloom, Hub Can, regarding the future determination of sex. Must we accept the view of Empedocles of Trinacria that the right ovary, the post-menstrual period, certain others, is responsible for the birth of males? Or are the too long neglected spermatoza or nemosperms the differentiating factors? Or is it, as most embryologists incline to opine, such as Culpepper, Spallanzani, Blumenbach, Lusk, Hertwig, Leopold and Valenti, a mixture of both? This would be tantamount to a cooperation, one of nature's favorite devices, between the nisus formitavis, or the nemosperm, on the one hand, and on the other, a happily chosen position, succubitus felix, of the passive element. The other problem raised by the same inquirer is scarcely less vital: infant mortality. It is interesting because, as he pertinently remarks, we are all born in the same way, but we all die in different ways. Mr. M. Mulligan, Hyde et Huge Doc, blames the sanitary conditions in which our grey-lunged citizens contract adenoids, pulmonary complaints, etc., by inhaling the bacteria which lurk in the dust. These factors, he alleges, and the revolting spectacles offered by our streets, hideous publicity posters, religious ministers of all denominations, mutilated soldiers and sailors, exposed scorbutic car drivers, the suspended carcasses of dead animals, paranoid bachelors, and unfructified duennas, these, he said, were accountable for any and every falling off in the caliber of the race. Calipedia, he promised, would soon be generally adopted, and all the graces of life, genuinely good music, agreeable literature, light philosophy, instructive pictures, plaster cast reproductions of the classical statues such as Venus and Apollo, artistic colored photographs of prize babies. All these little attentions would enable ladies who were in a particular condition to pass the intervening months in a most enjoyable manner. Next, please.
Mr. J. Crothers, disc back, attributes some of these demises to abdominal trauma in the case of women workers subjected to heavy labors in the workshop and to marital discipline in the home, but by far the vast majority of neglect, private or official, culminating in the exposure of newborn infants, the practice of criminal abortion, or in the atrocious crime of infanticide. Although the former we are thinking of neglect is undoubtedly only too true, the case he cites for nurses forgetting to count the sponges in the peritoneal cavity is too rare to be normative. In fact, when one comes to look into the wonder is that so many pregnancies and deliveries go off so well as they do, all things considered, and in spite of our human shortcomings, which often balk nature in her intentions. An ingenious suggestion is that thrown out by Mr. V. Lynch back Arith that both natality and mortality, as well as all other phenomena of evolution, tidal movements, lunar phases, blood temperatures, disease in general, everything in fine, in nature's vast workshop, from the extinction of some remote sun to the blossoming of one of the countless flowers which beautify our public parks, is subject to a law of numeration as yet unascertained. Still, the plain, straightforward question why a child of normally healthy parents and seemingly a healthy child and properly looked after succumbs unaccountably in early childhood, though other children of the same marriage do not, must certainly, in the poet's words, give us pause. Nature, we may rest assured, has her own good and cogent reason for whatever she does. In all probability, such deaths are due to some law of anticipation by which organisms in which morbus germs have taken up their residence. Modern science has conclusively shown that only the plasmic substance can be said to be immortal, tend to disappear at an increasingly earlier stage of development, an arrangement which, though productive of pain to some of our feelings, notably the maternal, is nevertheless, some of us think, in the long run beneficial to the race in securing thereby the survival of the fittest. Next, please.
Mr. S. Douglas, Div Scep, remark, or should it be called an interruption, that an omnivorous being which can masticate, deglute, digest, and apparently pass through the ordinary channel with the plutoperfect imperturbability, such multifarious ailments as cancrenous females, emaciated by parturition, corpulent professional gentlemen, not to speak of jaundiced politicians and choleric nuns, might possibly find gastric relief in an innocent collation of staggering Bob, reveals as naught else could, and in a very unsavory light the tendency above alluded to. For the enlightenment of those who are not so intimately acquainted with the minutiae of the municipal abattoir as this morbid-minded ascete and embryo philosopher, who for all his overweening bumptiousness in things scientific can scarcely distinguish an acid from an alkali, prides himself on being, it should perhaps be stated that staggering Bob, in the vile parlance of our lower class licensed victualers, signifies the cookable and edible flesh of a calf newly dropped from its mother. In a recent public controversy with Mr. L. Bloom, Pub Cam, which took place in the Common Hall of the National Maternity Hospital, 29, 30, and 31 Hollow Street, of which, as is well known, Dr. Ahorn, lick in mid FKQCPI, is the able and popular master. It is reported by eyewitnesses as having stated that once a woman has let the cat into the bag, an aesthetic allusion, presumably to one of the most complicated and marvelous of all of nature's processes, the act of sexual congress, she must let it out again, or give it life, as he phrased it, to save her own. At the risk of her own was the telling rejoinder of his interlocutor, none the less effective for the moderate and measured tone in which it was delivered. Next, please.
Meanwhile, the skill and patience of the physician had brought about a happy encouragement. It had been a weary while both for patient and doctor. All that surgical skill could do was done, and the brave woman had manfully helped. She had fought the good fight, and now she was very, very happy. Those who have passed on, who have gone before, are happy too, as they gaze down and smile upon the touching scene. Reverently look at her as she reclines there in the mother light in her eyes. That longing hunger for baby fingers, a pretty sight it is to see in the first bloom of her new motherhood, breathing a silent prayer of thanksgiving to one above, the universal husband. And as her loving eyes behold her baby, she wishes only one blessing more, to have her dear Doddy here with her to share her joy, to lay in his arms that mite of God's clay, the fruit of their lothful embraces. Next.
He is older now. You and I may whisper it, and a trifle stooped in the shoulders. Yet in the wiggling of years, a grave dignity has come to the conscientious second accountant of the Ulster Bank College Green branch. O Dualdi, loved one of old, faithful life mate now. It may never be again, that far-off time of the roses. With the old shake of her pretty head, she recalls those days. God, how beautiful, now across the mist of years. But their children are grouped in her imagination about the bedside, hers and his. Charlie, Mary Alice, Frederick Albert, if he had lived, Mamie, Budgie, Victoria Francis, Tom, Violet, Constant Louisa, darling little Bobsy, called after a famous hero of the South African War, Lord Bobs of Waterford and Kandahar. And now this last pledge of their union, a Purifoy if ever there was one. But true Purifoy knows. Young, hopeful will be christened Mortimer Edward, after the influential third cousin of Mr. Purifoy in the Treasury Remembrance Offices, Dublin Castle. And so time wags on. But Father Cronian has dealt lightly here. No, let no sigh break from that bosom, dear gentle Mina, and only knock the ashes from your pipe. The seasoned briar you still fancy when the curfew rings. For you, may it be the distant day, and doubt the light whereby you read in the sacred book, for the oil too has run low, and so with a tranquil heart to bed to rest. He knows and when call in his own good time. You too have fought the good fight and played loyally your man's part. Sir, to you my hand. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Now, to you, Joe.
There are sins, or let us call them as the world calls them, evil memories that are hidden away by man in the darkest places of the heart, but they abide there and wait. He may suffer their memory to grow dim. Let them be as though they had not been, and all but persuade himself that they were not, or at least were otherwise. Yet a chance word will call them forth suddenly, and they rise up to confront him in the most various circumstances, a vision or a dream, or while timbrel and harp soothe his senses, or amid the cool silver tranquility of the evening, or at the feast at midnight, when he is now filled with wine. Not to insult over him will the vision come, as over one that lies under her wrath, not for vengeance to cut him off from the living, but shrouded in the piteous vesture of the past, silent, remote, reproachful. Jane.
The stranger still regarded on the face before him a slow recession of that false calm there, imposed as it seemed by habit or some studied trick upon words so embittered as to accuse in their speaker an unhealthiness, a flair for the cruder things of life. A scene disengages itself in the observer's memory, evoked, it would seem, by a word of so natural a homeliness, as if those days were really present there, as some thought, with their immediate pleasures. A shaven space of lawn, one soft May evening, the well-remembered grove of lilacs at Roundtown, purple and white, fragrant, slender spectators of the game, but with much real interest in the pellets as they run slowly forward over the sward or collide and stop one by its fellow with a brief, alert shock. And yonder, about that gray urn where the water moves at times in thoughtful irrigation, you saw another as fragrant sisterhood, Chloe, Addie, Tiny, and their darker friend with I know not what of a resting in her pose then, Our Lady of Cherries, a comely brace of them pendant from an ear, bringing out the foreign warmth of the skin so daintily against the cool, ardent fruit. Orla?
Orla, your microphone is off.
Sorry, I was reading away. Now I have to find out where we were.
A lad of 4 or 5.
A lad of 4 or 5 in Lindsay Wolseley, blossom time, but there will be cheer in the kindly hearth when ere long the bowls are gathered and touched, is standing on the urn, secured by that circle of girlish fond hands. He frowns a little, just as this young man does now, with a perhaps too conscious enjoyment of danger, but must needs glance at whilst towards where his mother watches from the piazzetta, giving upon the flower clothes with a faint shadow of remoteness or of reproach, alles verganglich in her glad look. Mark this, father, and remember, the end comes suddenly. Enter that antechamber of birth where the studious are assembled, and note their faces. Nothing, as it seems, there of rash or violent, quietude of custody rather, befitting their station in that house, the vigilant watch of shepherds and of angels about a crib in Bethlehem of Judah long ago. Next, please.
But as before, the lightning, the serried storm clouds, heavy with preponderant excess of moisture, in swollen masses, turgidly distended, compass earth and sky in one vast slumber, impending above parched field and drowsy oxen and blighted growth of shrub and verdure, till in an instant a flash reaves their centres, and with the reverberation of the thunder, a cloudburst pours its torrent. So, and not otherwise, was the transformation, violent and instantaneous, upon the utterance of the word. Burks, out of things, my Lord Stephen, giving the cry, and a tag and bobtail of all of them after, cockerel, jackanapes, welsher, hill doctor, punctual bloom at heels with the universal grabbing at headgear, ash plants, bilboes, Panama hats and scabbards, Zermatt alpenstocks and whatnot. A dale of lusty youth, noble every student there. Nurse Callan, taken aback in the hallway, cannot stay them. Nurse smiling surgeon coming downstairs with news of transplantation ended. A full pound, if a milligram. They hark him on. The door, it is open. Ha! They are out tumultuously. Off for a minute's race, all bravely legging it. Burks of Densville and Hollows their ulterior goal. Dixon follows, giving them sharp language, but raps out an oath. He too and on. Bloom stays with the nurse, with nurse a thought to send a kind word to happy mother and nursling up there. Dr. Diet and Dr. Quiet. Looks she too not other now. Ward of watching in Horn's house has told its tale in that washed out pallor. Them all being gone, a glance of mother wit helping. He whispers close and going, Madam, when comes the stork bird for thee? Next, please.
The air without is impregnated with rain dew moisture, life essence celestial, glistening on Dublin stone there under star shiny coilum. God's heir, the All-Father's heir, scintillant circumambient Cecil, breathe it deeply into thee. By heaven, Theodore Purefoy, thou hast done a doughty deed and no botch. Thou art, I vow, the remarkable progenitor, barring none in this chaffering, all including most ferruginous con, astounding. In her lay a God-framed, God-given, preformed possibility, which thou hast fructified with thy modicum of man's work. Cleave to her, serve, toil on, labor like a very bandog, and let scholarment and all the Malthusiasts go hang. Thou art all their daddies, Theodore. Art drooping under thy load, bemoiled with butcher's bills at home, and ingots not thine in the counting house? Head up, for every new begotten thou shalt gather thy homer of ripe wheat. See, thy fleece is drenched. Should we stop there?
Yes. That'll be fine. So I'm gonna underline, dost envy Darby Dolman there with his Joan.
Oh my God.
Who was that?
I love the
Oh.
universal husband.
That was a long gestation.
All righty. So let's get pages down. This is very important. Every week on Wednesday, I go, God, did I write it down? Did I write it
Yeah,
down?
yeah. If only I had.
So the next
Three in Wordsworth.
Wordsworth is 383.
383.
Okay.
Bodley Head is 345.
Okay. 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Penguin is 420.
Penguin 420.
The long penguin is 555.
Penguin long 5, 5, 5. Let me get that 420. I wrote that 420 pretty poorly. 420. Okay. Any other additions out there? All right. I guess there we are. My goodness. Boggles the mind.
I've mentioned Daniel Mulhall recently, the former ambassador from Ireland to Washington, who does a guide to Ulysses. And I was reading him this afternoon, and he said, this is a very difficult episode. And he said, whisper it. If you want to skip by it, just do it.
No, you tell us, Donna. No, you tell us.
I wasn't prepared to skip it, though.
No, I think it's not for the faint-hearted man. I mean, I'm just fascinated. In my past life, I was a midwife.
Yes.
You know, well, only briefly, 50 years ago, and I'm just men weren't in the labor ward in those days,
No.
Right.
and they wouldn't
They were
be.
in the pub.
They were in the pub, yeah, and so yeah, it's interesting, all the philosophizing about labor and childbirth.
Yeah.
I liked where he wrote, she delivered the baby manfully.
Man,
Yes.
yeah, there is kind of a touch of misogyny about it all, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot more than a touch. I think you should do a hammer blow.
I was just being nice, but
Well, this is There's a lot in it, you know. There's a terrifying criticism of Bloom.
Yes,
You know, I
that's
mean,
exactly. Are you looking at page 370 by any chance?
am I looking at 370?
Where's that?
Yes, on 370. That's what I was thinking of.
Oh man,
Like
they
this is
just-
Molly. This is Molly's, yeah, and this is Bloom thinking of Molly and himself. Unhappy woman. That's Molly. She has been too long and too persistently denied her legitimate prerogative to listen to his objurgations with any feeling other than the derision of the desperate.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a very powerful description of a woman who was given up in a marriage.
Mm.
Can't do it anymore. It's just beyond the beyonds, you know, and that's inside Bloom's head. You know,
I guess it's inside Bloom's head. I mean, it's so
yeah,
so cold and just pins him on the wall big time
yeah.
that
Yeah.
you know,
And it goes on then to describe his masturbation habit when he should be paying attention to his wife, you know, and then goes on to faded beauties may console him, you know, some faded beauty. Like it's
Oh yeah.
like it's hardly misogynistic. It's hard on everyone. Like
He wasn't able
all
to
sides of it.
multitask, Joe.
Hmm?
He wasn't able to multitask.
Well, that's
He,
a way
he
of putting it.
couldn't masturbate and attend to Molly at the same time.
Well, see, this is the whole point, and that like Molly's put up with this for 11 years, you know. So, and that would be a very unusual thought process in the 1920s to blame the man, you know. Just saying it, you know, it's kind of.
well,
It's
there is that much earlier in the book. There's that thing
Yeah.
about it sounded like an old wise saying that you do blame the man, like for Rudy.
Oh yes, yeah.
You do blame the man in that particular case, and
Yeah,
that like that's something that is a common saying among people in the town.
Yeah.
Um,
If it lives, it's the mother's. If it dies, it was the father's. Something like that, isn't it? As they go
Yeah,
around.
something like that.
Yeah.
It's quite brutal
Yeah.
also. But the thing about this section here, it goes on and on and
On and
on.
on. Yeah.
It really takes him to task for the servant for trying to seduce the servant.
Yeah.
It
With a scouring brush, she bait him off.
Yeah, it takes him back to where he was taking advantage of a
Yeah.
poor girl of the streets, Birdie McBride or Birdie
Bridie Kelly.
Bridie Kelly.
Yeah.
Bridie Kelly.
And
And
by the way, that lane, it still exists, where he describes meeting Bridie Kelly, and it's been gentrified,
Mhm,
but it's still there beside the old bonded warehouse,
mhm.
and it's right outside the exit from the old university, you know,
Ah.
and it's right beside Kelly's corner, you know, and the girls did not say my name is Patricia Cunningham, you know, they had a kind of a stage name.
Right.
And Kelly, you know, would be the Kelly of Kelly's corner. It's around the corner. And Bridie would be her stage name. The one thing she was not called was Bridie. So you know, you can go there and say, I stood there yesterday looking at it myself, you know. I said, this is amazing that maybe this is where Joyce himself, you know, may have met a girl once, you know, that stuck with him in his head. But
Yeah.
Bloom's first encounters were a prostitute, sexual.
Yeah. Well, and it sounded like, you know, that maybe even Bridie was not even so much a prostitute as just a poor girl who would occasionally try to make a little money because she was desperate.
Oh,
And-
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there's the terrifying vision that Bloom is having
Yeah.
that he may have fathered a child. He may have a child through this girl that he doesn't know about.
Of course.
I mean, this is totally unsparing.
Yeah. And that lane is right. It's 50 yards from high school. The site of high school is now demolished. Like even the building that went up it's a big empty development site now, huge.
Mhm.
But like
Where is this, Joe?
the Harcourt Street.
Okay. Yeah.
The old high school was there, and that's where Bloom, as it were, went to school. So he could have been doing this at school, you know.
And the site that you're talking about is where the Garda station has been knocked down, is
Yeah,
it?
where the Garda station has been demolished. Yeah,
Mhm.
and whatever's going up, I don't know, but it's going to be vast. But so you know the implication there for Bloom. I mean, it's very critical of Bloom.
Mm.
And it's Bloom's head itself. It's doing the criticizing.
But of course, we know that Joyce is doing the criticizing, not Bloom.
Well, it's the narrator.
Yeah.
That's affected by Bloom's. Because the thinking is that it's Bloom's. The narrator seems to know things that only Bloom knows, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
and that. But and then, sorry, that's enough for me. I don't want to.
I was just going to say, Donna, you were asking about the pub last week beside Hollis Street, and they
Yes.
mentioned a place called Burke's
Yeah.
of Denzil Lane. And Denzil Lane, as far as I can remember, is the lane. You mentioned a pub, which I would have known as being called Howl at the Moon.
Howl at the, yes, Howl at
on
the
the
Moon.
corner. So maybe that was Burke's.
And what was there a little lane just beyond Howl at the
There's a
Moon
lane that goes
took
down
you around the back of the building?
between both Mount Streets. There's a lane, but I
Yes.
don't know if that's Denzil Lane or if that was called Denzil Lane.
Okay.
That's where Denzil Lane is, yes.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way down to Lincoln Place.
So there was a pub back there in the day.
Yeah.
I think it was owned by, do you remember the lotto winners? There was a syndicate of lotto winners.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Larry Murphy's? No, that's further down Legacy.
Further down, yeah.
Yeah.
Burke's was on the corner of
Okay.
Hollis Street.
So
So
is
it
that
wasn't actually
the
on
one
the
that
lane.
Orla's mentioned, the Howl at the Moon?
Yeah, I don't know where Howl at the Moon was. I didn't know it.
It was on the corner directly across, well, not on the corner, no, but it was across from Hollis Street.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
on
Did
the
you-
corner of Denzil Lane.
Was it? Yeah.
I can't
Yes.
say I was ever in there. I think we had a work party one Christmas in that pub. But I know
Orla,
Mount
it
Street,
used
the passport
to be
office
called
is on Mount Street.
O'Dwyer's.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, Orla. It used to be called O'Dwyer's, and then they added a nightclub, which became Howl at the Moon.
Yeah. But the maps all put Burke's on the corner of Fenian Street and Hollis Street
Okay.
at the time. That don't know whether those maps are right or not, but that's what they do.
So is Fenian Street the one that goes down by the side or down by the main entrance to Hollis Street? Is that Fenian Street?
No, that's no, that'd be Marion
It's at
Square.
the back. If you go,
Okay.
if you, you know where Sweeney is.
Yes.
Okay, and Oriel House is across the road. The road that's sort of, that road is Fenian Street all the way down past the road up to Hollis Street and all the way down there.
Gotcha.
And so
Okay.
in contemporary world, you would have Twitter and LinkedIn and all those offices are all along there.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, we meant to say X now, but that office is there. All those offices are built along there.
Yeah.
Okay.
There used to be a petrol station that was KBC Bank, but I don't know what's there now.
Archers was.
So,
yeah.
I have a question for the group here.
Sure. Talk about that.
I find myself more and more wanting to do, maybe not necessarily in this particular time slot, but in some time slot, I more and more want to do a close reading of like Oxen of the Sun, just to take an example. I mean, I can imagine spending
Mm,
months on this.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, like there's so much I want to find out more about, like that whole thing with Haynes. It was a very
Yeah.
short little thing, but it's a very bizarre.
Mm.
It's like Haynes had been, taken down absinthe or something and turned into, it's like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
there's
he appears from behind the panel, which is very
Yeah.
weird.
yeah,
Mhm.
appears and disappears. I think he appears again.
Yeah,
Um,
at the opposite door.
Yeah. But some people say he's not really there. It's in someone's imagination.
Okay, well, there's
Uh,
that's a whole thing itself. And how about the thing where Mrs. Purfoy finally has her birth, and very soon after that is when Stephen Dedalus shouts "Burks!"
yeah.
and
Yeah.
all
yeah.
the guys launch up except for Bloom. Bloom is lagging behind, but everybody else launches up, and they go out into
Yeah.
the wet streets, which is
Yeah.
almost like another type of birth going on, where they burst out of this room, they go into the streets. The street is freshly wet and all. Anyway, it's just like,
Good.
Okay.
anyway, think about that idea, and you're interested in that, meaning each of you. And if we would want to do it as a separate thing, or just change the pace of this reading.
That's Burke's.
There's Burks. Okay.
Oh,
Is that
Where
the
is
building?
that?
I don't know. I got it in Patrick Hastings' book.
Off the
That doesn't
top of
look-
my head, Duncan, I think it could be interesting to do it in this group, just looking up the words we don't know and talking about it, slowly. I think it could be an interesting exercise, rewarding.
Mhm.
I never
it
heard
is-
the word resiled until today.
No, I didn't either.
I've been through several court cases, Orla, and you will find the defense resiling from the prosecutor's argument.
Yeah.
It's like an objection, but it's I don't agree with what you're saying, is really what it means.
Mhm. Let me look through. As I go through, I tend to draw lines and put arrows, and
Mm.
Exactly.
I don't always remember why I did it, but I do it. Well, the whole thing about staggering Bob, now that's another interesting thing with all kinds of implications in it. Because of course, I assume others of you know that actually staggering Bob is also a symptom of syphilis.
Oh,
That a person with a fairly advanced syphilis, they walk like a newborn calf. They
Mm.
kind of do that sort of thing.
Mm.
Orla? Yeah. It says it's a block north of where they are. Burke's Pub is a block north of where they are in Hollis Street.
Okay.
Well, Patrick Hastings is from America, so he would look at it in blocks.
Well, when I'm back in work in the office on Monday, so I'm going to walk up the road and find it and take the photograph.
photograph, exactly.
Well, it's a red building. Red building.
I don't think it's there anymore.
Probably not.
I went to
Very
that
nice.
corner and I can't remember what I saw, but I didn't see a pub. There was some sort of shop, I think. It was years ago. It was 17 Hollis Street was its address. And that's in 1819. So
Mhm.
it's on a corner. So might find something. Might find a plaque.
And do they have in any of the annotations that staggering Bob is slang for syphilis? Or is that something you know and that you're adding to the depth of knowledge of Joyce by telling us this
Oh,
completely?
I've read this in several references. I can't give you a reference right now. There is a very controversial book. I believe it's called The Burden of Disease in
Yeah.
Joyce. And not everybody agrees with it. I think it would be Stephen Birmingham, who also his chapters on syphilis and Joyce are also quite controversial. But there are even letters in The Burden of Disease. There's this whole thing this interesting thing that actually Mulligan, who is generally cast in a very negative light, that actually Mulligan supposedly was quite helpful to Joyce, if you accept that Joyce had a venereal disease when he was young, and Mulligan was a medical student and he knew about these things, and supposedly he was helpful. But
And Mulligan is St. John Gogarty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are letters, et cetera, but it's a very controversial area. I mean,
I just forgot to have lunch with Julie.
oh well.
Did I?
Well, let me check.
Oh,
Katrina's having a domestic conversation there.
Is 22nd. Today's the 21st.
Let me do.
it's Thursday. Oh, good. I thought it was Friday. Whew. I'm surprised.
Oh, you're hilarious.
Okay. So Katrina, just to let you know, I just muted you. If you want to say something, you'll have to unmute yourself. Not a problem. I figured you didn't. Oh, what happened there? Okay, there we're back. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. I mean, and this is a complex thing, and it's almost, I was looking at it today, is almost like a warm up to the next chapter. There's a few little things that I'm going, Cersei's coming up, and things like Haynes coming and going suddenly.
I was thinking of that. It's like a precursor. Very odd.
Yeah. Okay. It is 2:32. Other things that cannot wait till next time? I guess that's a sign that we have done all we can do today. And I thank you kindly. I am certainly well satisfied and brain is full.
If we were in Sweeney's, we'd have to adjourn to the pub.
Yeah.
The office.
We would have joined. I can't imagine what the conversation would be like.
Orla, have you gone to Kennedy's with the group?
No, sometimes I go in beforehand to get the keys of the place.
All right.
Because it does food, so you eat beforehand and then you go after for the big pints.
Right. So there's nothing you can reveal about the conversation.
No. I'd say they're very entertaining and it might carry on to all sorts of things. Now, Joe would know a lot more than me because he's a Sweeney stalwart. And I'm here, not there on weekends. Joe, aren't you one of the Sweeney people?
Oh, I was actually a director of Sweeney's like 10 years ago, you know, like I'm out of it a long time. And I sometimes I have loads of friends who, you know, of my day, but that particular group has moved on. There was a golden age there. But they all finished their university students, and a lot of them are in Australia and around the world, you know, earning a living and having babies and stuff. But they were very lively students back then, and as you say, the conversation was terrific. Then I since then have been unwell and concentrated on that a lot, you know. But I still say I stick my head in there at the odd time when I can bear it, you know, because it's gone to the dogs. Sorry, you know.
Why has it gone to the dogs?
Oh, don't start me, you know. Well, you see, I remember it in a particular way, and stuff we tried to do and things we were successful at, and sort of. So
You can't go home again.
You just can't step in the same river twice, you know.
Right.
So it goes on. I worry about it as it's going to be lost, you know. It'll go the way of the Ormond Hotel and the House of the Dead.
You mean Sweeney's, the building? Really?
I would think that the real estate reality.
It's a huge real estate problem. It was up for sale. It was up for sale. Was it just before COVID?
Yes, it was.
And they were asking for 5 million, and it's unbuyable because there are apartments upstairs that have been basically sold. I can't remember, they're on long leases, like 900 years and this sort of stuff. So you get all them, and you get all those responsibilities.
Oh.
And you know, if you wanted to buy them back, you'd be talking very much more money. And I have a financial background as well, so I did have one person who would be in a position to have bought it, and he doesn't live in Ireland. He's Irish, but he lives abroad, and he's interested in literature, and he might have laid out the money, but we worked out that to rescue Sweeney's would cost twice what it cost to do the Molly. The Molly is huge.
Yeah.
Or the Newman House, and what you get is you get a few square feet, and then there are various claims to it. You know, for instance, there's one particular party who claims to own all the fittings, all those historical fittings. There's a person who claims ownership to those, then disputes the landlord's right to sell them. And they could go to Switzerland overnight, the way the other hotel juries went. So I worry about it, and the figure I got, like if you bought it, it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't, I wouldn't have 5 million buttons, you know. But the figure that the quantity surveyor gave says you could put dollar for dollar on that in terms of what needs to be done to the building.
Who owns it, Joe?
A 10 million buy, and all you've done is bought a whole load of problems. So I worry about it because, like we saw this, it's like watching a car crash in slow motion. The Ormond and the House of the Dead.
Oh yeah.
Terrible loss.
That's right.
The best Joyce buy in Dublin is Barney Kiernan's. that could be made viable.
And where's that, Joe?
Little Britain Street, Cyclops, you know. And but that's derelict, you see. And so if someone was, you throw a few million at that, you convert it, but it's in the wrong place. Sweeney's has perfect. It's, you know, you couldn't make up the location. It's so good.
What's his name? PJ Murphy said that it belonged to the Duke of Ormond, whoever the Duke of Ormond is.
Yes, yeah. In my day, we paid rent to the Ormond family. Anne Ormond is descendant. I have no idea how the ownership is deployed now. I imagine it's still, because nobody would buy it. So
Did you say Anne Ormond, that the politician?
The upstairs? Sorry?
No,
you go ahead.
No, that was I never met the Anne Ormond in question. It was just a name that I would see on the financial statements going out.
Sorry, Orla, I cut across you there.
But there you are. You know, like it's you know. So I knew it when it was full of enthusiasm and youthful people, you know, from university, and they were in there and they were discussing art and the meaning of art, and they're from all over the world, and people who could, you know, theater groups from America would just stop by and all that. And it was fantastic stuff. And you still see people, people see people. I went by going COVID a few times, going my walks, and I'd meet tourists outside it, you know, it would be shut down. And it didn't close during COVID. PJ decided it was a pharmacy. Pharmacies have to close.
He says it's open 365 days a year, including Christmas Day.
Yeah, PJ talks a great game.
Well, it's like all things to be enjoyed and cherished while it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy it while it's there.
The wrecking ball has been chasing me all my life. Ever I've lived.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you know, the money boys discover it and they come in and it's all different. And you know,
it was to be demolished in 2010, and it was to represent. There's a hotel nearby, and it was to represent a redevelopment of the hotel, and it was to be an entrance to the hotel, and they needed the site. But the facade is a protected facade, the external part. So
it could be moved.
That's the problem. It could be moved overnight.
Yeah. No, but I mean transferred somewhere else. Take the facade and the insides. Forget about
the school of thought say move it up to Molly, but it's like it wouldn't be right up there. It has to stay where it is. I would think, you know.
Sure.
I think if anything happens with it, there'll be a revolution, you know. Because
it's just that if you think of the Joyce Centre, they have the front door from Eccles Street inside.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, once again, I'm going to mention the John McCourt book, because he goes into not only people's opinions and institutions' opinions about Ulysses over the 100-year period, but there's mention of buildings, there's mention of various projects. There's a whole long thing about the hatred towards the Americans. In the American universities that were doing Joyce studies, there was a lot of friction there, and after Dublin started accepting Joyce and Joyce's Ulysses as a viable and valuable thing, then there became this whole thing. And anyway,
if it wasn't for the American universities, they wouldn't have been there for them when it.
No.
Yeah, this is, hey, human beings are human beings.
Yeah,
If we can't find things to fight about,
yeah. So
we
it's,
will wonder
I
if we
tell you,
us.
a lot of Guinness has been spilled on these conversations, you know, over the years. They still fight about it among themselves, you know. So,
Yep.
yeah,
All
I
right.
just concentrate on the book. I love the book.
Uh-huh. Anyway, you all are treasures. I appreciate you so much.
Loved it.
I look
Thank you.
forward to the next gathering, and I will click the red button and disappear for the moment.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Right.
Bye.